Rashad Bateman comes in motion to the right. Lamar takes the snap. Blitz pressure coming. He pumps once. Pocket collapsing. He backed up to the 20. Steps up. Throws complete. Hill has it. Touchdown Ravens! Lamar Jackson extended the play just as Hill got open, and the Ravens are on the cusp of blowing the Steelers out.
That was Lamar Jackson to Justice Hill for a absolutely ridiculous touchdown at the end of the first half. This is NFL Daily, and yes, we're going live on YouTube, and everyone listening the next day. That was the end of an absolutely perfect first half by the Ravens. Went into halftime 21-0. Did not look back for the rest of the night. 28-14 is the final, although they ended with the ball, ended up 1 yard short of 300 yards rushing on the day. Yes, I'm Gregg Rosenthal. I'm in my somewhat smoky garage. I don't know if this show is a health hazard tonight, but it's still a perfect night to talk football, and I have the perfect person to do it with. Bill Barnwell from ESPN. What is happening? And thank you for spending your late Saturday night with me, Bill.
It's a pleasure, Greg, to be sitting here. I love any time there's a call where you have a announcer saying, throw it away, end the play, give up, don't do it. And then the person who is incredibly talented does it and it succeeds. So perfect setup for the show right here.
Yes. Thank you for covering me there. That was our friend Jerry Sandusky, Rod Woodson on the call for WBAL. And I'm glad we're not listening to them on the season. I think we had to show a first half highlight. Like often we play the play that kind of ends the game. Mm-hmm. There wasn't necessarily that play. You had the Derrick Henry
might have
touchdown.
Ended the game, to be honest with you.
But the story was the first half, and it's not like sexy to talk about, but the first half there were two drives. The first drive of the game where they ran the ball 9 out of 13 times, and then Lamar Jackson throws an absolutely awesome touchdown through a little hole to hit Rashad Bateman on a 3rd and long for the touchdown. And then the other touchdown drive where they go 13 straight runs, the longest drive any team had all season without passing the ball for 85 yards. And like that kind of felt like the story. The story was the beginning of the game, and then the rest of it was just aftermath.
Yeah, certainly for a team that did not have the player who most of us, I think, believe is their only above average wide receiver in Zay Flowers, it didn't feel like the Ravens missed even the tiniest of beats on offense. And what struck me about this game, Greg, is we do hear people talk about this idea of the divisional game, right? That you're playing a team you've played multiple times. This was the 3rd matchup between the Ravens and the Steelers this season. And it felt like every time the Ravens ran a zone read, ran power read, ran, pin pull with the read with the read ability for Lamar Jackson, it felt like they never had answers for it. It felt like the Steelers were making mental mistakes. It felt like they were sloppy, especially on that long Henry touchdown run in the second half. There was a huge hole where multiple players ran with Lamar Jackson. Early in the game, you have Micah Fitzpatrick coming down from free safety to try and tackle Lamar Jackson as the scrape on the scrape exchange as the defender on the edge to try and stop a 3rd and short. Like it felt like in a situation where the Ravens are a very familiar team against the Steelers was still trying to find answers 2 quarters into this game after having played them twice already this season.
That's because there's no good answer, right? Like the first half, the answer was kind of let Lamar run, and he was running quickly. He had 10 rushes with about 10 minutes left in the second quarter. He ended up with 15 rushes for 81 yards. I don't know if he tired himself out or they just realized that that's not the best way to go, but that he really didn't run the ball much again until the very end of the game when they were trying to kill the clock and he needed to. He looked a little banged up a couple times. But you mentioned that long Henry run. That's one where the dots are beautiful. I know you love the dots, Bill.
I do love the dots. I'm a simple man.
The dots all go with Lamar on that run. 4 dots go to Lamar, and Derrick Henry goes up the middle. And the reason is Lamar holds it extra long or makes it look like he's holding it extra long or just can't decide until the last second. And it's been the story of them all season. They're almost a hard team to talk about, at least in this matchup, when it's just so much obvious they're better, because it is the same thing week after week. And I'm not sure there's a great answer for it, but this Steelers defense needed to be like unreal to carry this team around them, and they weren't. They were below average for 5 weeks straight. It's kind of a Mike Tomlin thing, and just checking out the comments before we got going, like the whole fire Tomlin from the Steelers fans is going to be a thing this week. Well, let's put a pin in that for a second while we talk about this game. But their defense just didn't really have enough answers on a night when Lamar did drop back to pass. They did pressure him a decent amount. It wasn't like that was the problem, but they weren't special. It's hard to be a special defense in 2024 or 2025, and they just weren't special.
Well, we're going to talk about a game, I assume. We're going to talk about the earlier Saturday game
Yes.
as well. And that was one where, to me, the best players on the Texans defense won them the game. Derek Stingley was awesome. Will Anderson was awesome. Daniel Hunter was awesome. And they were transcendent in those moments. For the Steelers, their stars were not stars in this game. I mean, TJ Watt, what was your favorite TJ Watt moment in this game, Greg? Would you even have noticed he was on the field? If he
like him shaking off a lot of injuries, he had the elbow thing. There wasn't much a pressure or two. It's similar, frankly, to a lot of TJ Watt performances over the last 4 or 5 weeks. Yeah,
I mean, Cam Hayward, who I think is phenomenal, was a first-team All-Pro for me this year, did not have a big game, was in and out a bit. Joey Porter Jr. had a couple nice plays, but also a couple of penalties as well. Minka Fitzpatrick didn't have a great game. He got stiff-armed into the earth by Derrick Henry on a run. He got the rare double stiff-arm, where you get stiff-armed, and as you're falling backwards, Derrick Henry tries to stiff-arm you on the way down again, which is very impressive. It just felt like the Steelers, for them to win, for them to compete with great football teams, their stars have to make transcendent plays. And at their best this year, TJ Watt made those plays. Cam Hayward made those plays. Minka Fitzpatrick made those plays. They did not make those plays in this game, and there was no alternative for the Steelers defense.
No, I was surprised when I saw the pressure rate was as high as it was. Then again, Lamar only threw 21 passes.
Yeah.
He hit 16 of them for 175 yards.
Yeah.
So it couldn't have been more efficient. Part of that is he was pressured on I would guess 4 to 5 just true scrambles that he had, maybe 6, 7 scrambles that he had. And so he makes a positive out of that. But the first half of this game.
When they did get pressure, they weren't able to finish most of the time. And there were plenty of plays in this game where they got pressure on Lamar Jackson, and he just stepped up and stepped through those pressures and found an open receiver. That happened multiple times in this game.
Yeah, including that touchdown throw to Bateman, who has been so good this year and steps up tonight as the true one receiver, and maybe that influenced them leaning even more on the run than usual. Henry ends up with 26 carries for 186. They ran the ball 69% of the time. I mean, the game script obviously helped in that, but they were running it like that in the first half as well. But at halftime, they had 19 first downs. That's more than the number of plays that Pittsburgh had, 308 yards to 59. And the thing that will strike me the most, and let's listen to the clip. We got Eric behind the glass helping us out across the Los Angeles area. Just keep an eye, if you happen to watch this one on YouTube, of Derrick Henry, I believe, laughing during the middle of his touchdown in the second half.
Lamar in the shotgun, 3 receivers to the left. Jackson will hand it off. Derrick Henry up the middle. He's to the 30, 20, leg race, gone, touchdown, Derrick Henry, and they're going wild at M&T. 44 for the score.
I mean, this man is so happy. He's laughing while he's running, and you just kind of have to laugh seeing these two guys together. I do hope Zay Flowers, though, is back next week. We don't know, as we're taping this show, whether they'll play the Bills or potentially the Texans, but it's most likely the Bills, obviously a heavy favorite, which that feels crazy. You always get one divisional round game where you're like, I can't believe these guys are playing each other this early in the playoffs, and that's going to be the one.
Yeah, and you know what Derrick Henry's laughing at could be a lot of different things. It could be, hey, thank God I'm not playing in Tennessee right now. I have a meaningful team to play for here into January. It could be, hey, thank you for making this so easy that, nearly half of your team ran with Lamar Jackson on this fake, and I could just cut back through I think it was the B gap, and just run free for a touchdown untouched. I could accelerate through your entire defense without even having to run anybody over. Just the joy. I mean, this was a game where it felt very fun to be a member of this Ravens offense. We saw Anthony Miller, who I did not know was in the league still, catching multiple passes in this game from Lamar Jackson. It really was if you are a Lamar Jackson MVP person, and I, at the end of the year, decided I was one of those people, this was a great case for you. I mean, not only did Lamar Jackson make plenty of plays against a good defense, or with, on paper, a good defense, without his top wide receiver, not only did he run the ball effectively, but just his gravity for Derrick Henry was on display throughout this game. And we're not going to factor that into his numbers, but it is a meaningful thing. It is a real thing. Has been a thing all year. You can see clips most weeks of players on the edge who are just frozen because they don't want to miss out on trying to tackle Lamar, and then Derrick Henry runs past them for solid gains. So it has been just a perfect fit in Baltimore.
Yeah.
I think we all had expectations, and it's gone even better than any of us could have expected.
And yet, next week we'll tell the story, but we'll have a lot of time to talk about that. Lamar Jackson, by the way, is the first team All-Pro quarterback, which generally means you're going to win MVP. You never know.
Have we actually looked at that? I mean, I assume it's likely, but it feels like one of those things that we all take for granted, and I haven't seen anyone actually go back and check and see how often it actually turns into being a true thing. Maybe some people split their votes.
Well, yes, I have. It's never really come up where a guy gets more votes than the other guy, and then it would flip. But it's also it's completely different circumstances now than it's ever been, because they never used to have to vote for 5 different players, and so that does change the math. Where I guess you could split it. I mean, the Steve McNair, Peyton Manning year, they didn't have the exact same votes, so something changed up. It could change up. You also have Saquon Barkley being thrown into the mix. Some people could say, like Nick Wright pointed this out to me, like some people could say Lamar Jackson's the All-Pro, but Josh Allen's the MVP. Right. That part doesn't make sense, but I could see, you never know, if he won All-Pro by 1 vote or 2 votes, and more people had Lamar Jackson 4th or 5th where they had Josh Allen 2nd. You never know. Let's talk about the Steelers a little bit. Offensively, Russell Wilson played well in the second half of this game. I did think what the Ravens did coverage-wise in the first half, in general, kind of confused him. Like, all year, he's not really going through his reads very quickly. But he threw a lot of beautiful passes. In the end, you look at his stats, it was kind of like a Denver Broncos Russell Wilson game, where at the end, you're like, oh, those stats are pretty good, and yet you don't feel like he dominated the game. What did you think about Russ?
I mean, what I would say more than anything from the Broncos side, from the Steelers side, I should say, is that it did not feel like Mike Tomlin and Arthur Smith trusted Russell Wilson at all until they had no choice but to let him throw the football. I mean, it was a very limited, very conservative game plan. They punted multiple times on 4th and 1 and 4th and 2 in the first half of this game, when I think a lot of other teams would have been very comfortable going for it. And they didn't even bring on Justin Fields for those situations on 4th and short. Certainly when you think about how should I play as an underdog against a team that has an explosive offense, hold the football. Don't put your defense in a compromised position. And Mike Tomlin did not trust his team to do it. Even a week ago, he did trust his team to get aggressive on 4th down, and it backfired earlier in that game. And so it really felt like Russ almost succeeded in spite of what the Steelers' expectations were. I think they in this game, I think if the Steelers had won this game, Mike Tomlin believed the best way they were going to do it was, we're going to slow down Lamar Jackson, we're going to get a turnover or 2, and we're going to have as little Russell Wilson in the mix as possible. And it turned out to be the exact opposite. They had a lot of Russell Wilson because they had no choice. They were down a ton of points. He played pretty well, and the defense did absolutely nothing to win them the game for most of the game. So as Russ enters free agency, as we think about what the quarterback situation looks like for this team next year, nothing about what I saw tonight makes me think the Steelers are desperate to have him back for another go-around next year, presumably at a larger salary.
Yes, and yet they weren't into bringing Justin Fields into this
Absolutely
game.
Not.
I thought they might, but then it was rewarded. I mean, in the second half, he did everything that you would want Russell Wilson to do. He moved the ball. Now, they did have a possession where they had a chance to make it a one-possession game, and they stalled out. And you mentioned, having skipping going for 4th and inches in the first half. which is just brutal to have to go for it in 4th and 15. And then I sent the tweet out that's like, everybody now, like, repeat after me. And you thought I was making fun of you. I was just doing it because, like, we all have sent that tweet at some point.
So, like, a little too close to the vest for me.
No, I didn't even know. I mean, yeah, you skipped the early 4th down. I mean, the Ravens also skipped a 4th and 2
They did.
to start the second half. Maybe they thought they had a 21-0 lead, but they did go for 4th and about a foot from their own 40 late, up by 2 scores, which, considering where it was in the game and where it was on the field, actually was more of a gutsy call, if you want to say it, and was very smart to go for.
What I think happened is that they punted up. It was 21-0 at that point, I believe, when they punted from midfield. And I think John Harbaugh did I don't want to give them a spark. I don't want to give them a short field, get them back in the game. And then the Steelers drove like 98 yards for a touchdown anyway. Then he's like, well, screw this. There's no point in not giving them a spark. I'm just going to go for it. And then they went for it and got it with the Mark Andrews sneak, where the Steelers, I think, actually had 12 men on the field. They weren't even prepared for the Ravens going for it on 4th down, which is not a great sign for this coaching staff. You seem to be a little hesitant when I alluded to the idea of Russell Wilson not being back next year. You seem like you're about to push back.
I just don't know. This is the team that is fine just running back the same thing year after year and kind of accepting where they are. I think it's why so many people are frustrated, smart Steelers fans and dumb Steelers fans, like angry young ones or whatever that are just, get rid of this guy. It's the same thing every year. But I listen to John Ledyard. He's great, and he's frustrated. And I think it's fair to question a team that plays the same season over and over and makes the same mistakes. And everyone says it's not Tomlin's fault because it's the offense and what would you do with this roster and quarterbacks. And I just think, well, Tomlin keeps hiring these offensive coordinators. If he is unable to affect change on offense for a long period, that's on him. He's the head coach. He plays the same certain sort of way. I also think the way he attacks training camp and regular season practices should maybe be looked at, because they are the team that is known more than any team to hit training camp harder. And you always get on the teams like the Bengals who don't do anything early and then they start slow. Well, what about the reverse? Like, this is a team that's always in pads. They're always at training camp and they always stink in December. Like, this is I know they won a few games in the past few years, but like, they've collapsed down the stretch a number of times. I don't know if it's a one-to-one thing, but whatever he's doing isn't working. They consistently play their worst when they even have a decent team late in the season. They did it during the COVID year. They did it this season. And I don't know, like, are you just fine with being the 13th best team in the NFL every year? Because that's basically what
I will take issue with this argument.
Yes.
They did go 2-6 the year TJ Watt got hurt to start the season and then got hot at the end of the year. I also think a couple things that factor in there are strength of schedule. The Steelers played the hardest part of their schedule to finish the season this year. Usually the final few weeks of the year, you're most likely to play your divisional games, and the Steelers play in a very difficult division, so I think you're playing stiffer competition late in the year. But I do think your point is valid. This question of, should you have higher aspirations than just being a 10-7 team and hoping you get in? And the comparison I've seen people make as an argument to fire Mike Tomlin, and we watched Mike Tomlin, is the comparisons to Andy Reid at the end of his time in Philadelphia, which is not good in terms of comparisons. Andy Reid was like 4-12 his final year when he got fired. He had made the decision to hire Juan Castillo to be his DC, which went over disastrously. And there's this people have convinced themselves that Eagles fans were happy to let Andy Reid leave and left with goodwill, and it was just time, when Eagles fans have been trying to fire Andy Reid for like 5 years and been furious anytime anyone defended him, saying he was never going to win. I think with Mike Tomlin, like, people they've already moved it forward. Like, there's already that feeling of, we're never going to do it. And to me, I think that's probably unwarranted. He's already done it in the past. We've seen him win with a successful quarterback in the past. We've seen him make deep playoff runs in the past. We know he can do it. To me, we're punishing him for being good at this job.
Yes, I agree. But,
and I would say the coaching element to me is this. how many times do you see a player leave the Steelers and play better? And how many times do you see a player join the Steelers and play better? Just think about this year. Just think about wide receiver. I mean, Mike Williams was a functional part of this offense for stretches after looking like he had never played football before with the Jets. Deontay Johnson left the Steelers and was a disaster in multiple spots this year. Wide receiver is maybe the most coherent example, but this is not a franchise where players are coming here and getting worse. And if you have a guy you absolutely love, if you think Arthur Smith is the next great Steelers coach, I guess go for it.
No, I don't. In fact, he got way too much credit this year. Arthur Smith, this was a bad offense all year. Their success rate running the ball was bad all year. They were winning on these deep balls, which at no point did they have a sustainable plan. And to be clear, I think that Mike Tomlin is a very good coach that should absolutely keep his job, and that any speculation about it in terms of him getting fired is stupid. And any speculation on him getting traded is because of Mike Tomlin's agent. So you can't speak out of both sides of your mouth if you're Mike Tomlin, because this trade stuff pops up every once in a while, and he always gets a new contract out of it, and he likes getting new contracts. Why wouldn't you? He just got a new contract.
He just got a new contract with a no trade clause.
But they threw that out there again. It came out again, and it doesn't come out for no reason. Maybe it's a waste of time to talk about, because I don't really believe that the Rooneys would ever consider giving him up, and they shouldn't. But I also think it's fair to point out, if you're talking about the best coaches in the NFL, an organization that loses in the same sort of way year after year in the playoffs and isn't competitive when they make it and hasn't won a game in a long time. And in those 6 straight playoff losses, Bill, that they've had, they've trailed at halftime by an average of 15.5 points. I mean, so it's not that they just make it and they don't win. It's that they make it and they're not competitive. And it reminds me of the end of this season, Bill, because they lost those 3 games against the best teams in the NFL, 90-40. And they lost this game 21-0 at halftime. And yeah, the Bengals game was closer, but that's an 8-8 team. That's just sort of who they are. And so that's got to be frustrating for their fans.
I'm just picturing the Saints, where their entire aspirations are to be the Steelers. The idea of being a 9 or 10 win team that makes it to the playoffs every year and loses is exactly what their best case scenario is right now. I think we're both on the same page. I don't think we think it's Mike Tomlin, but let me ask you, Greg, let's try to be practical here. If you're not moving on from Mike Tomlin, if you're not trading away Mike Tomlin, what are you doing to break the cycle? What is the move the Steelers make? Because they tried drafting Kenny Pickett. That didn't work. That was clearly let's try to get our franchise quarterback on the cheap, and then we'll build around him with, more talent elsewhere. They have talented young players on this roster, no question. They went very cheap, the cheapest quarterback situation in the league this year, and that, got them back to where they were. What's the swing you're taking here at quarterback? What's the move?
It's a different mindset offensively. It's not hiring Matt Canada and Arthur Smith. I don't think Arthur Smith was good for this team. I wouldn't want to blow it up necessarily, because the offensive line, I think, started to finally make progress. Yeah. They have invested a lot in that, and there was progress. Then again, they were one of the worst running games in the entire NFL. So I guess how good is their offensive line? Their running game was basically based on their running backs being good and breaking tackles, but they didn't really have anything going in terms of the blocking scheme. I don't know. We should focus more on these Ravens. I mean, you're getting Steve Sims and Tylan Wallace and Anthony Miller out there. We're
gonna have plenty of time to talk about the Ravens in the weeks to come. The thing that really took me out in the first quarter of this game was the broadcast when first drive of the game for the Steelers to say, yeah, you're going to see more Jalen Warren today, because Mike Tomlin said he has the hot hand for them at running back. And I looked it up, and Jalen Warren had 6 carries for 21 yards and no catches the prior week. And that was the hot hand for this offense, was a running back averaging, I think, 3.5 yards a carry. It tells you sort of how dire things got for this offense here at the end of the season.
I mean, the thing is, they got the most I could have expected out of Van Jefferson and Calvin Austin, and at times Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. They were better.
But
Yeah.
what you didn't answer my question. What's
Yeah.
the move you're making? Are you?
I think it has to be
taking a swing at quarterback, or is it something else?
Well, sure. You have to always keep taking swings at quarterback, I think, every year in the draft until you have one. So I didn't love this idea. I'd rather have gone with Fields. Like, we'll never know. Everyone that apologized after the move to Wilson, ultimately, he was dead last in the NFL in the last 5 weeks in EPA per play. So I don't know, like, whether it would have been better or worse in the end with Russell Wilson or not. But it would have to be like having a totally different offensive, like, modern mindset, like, that they just haven't had. They have this weird idea that, hey, we're the Steelers. We want to run the ball. I think play to our defense, be conservative, and that's it. And those are the types of guys he hired. Like, Arthur Smith sold them on that vision. But when was the last time Arthur Smith had a consistently good running team, like, in terms of the talent that he had? I don't know.
The year before Bijan. I mean,
Yeah.
To be fair, I think there is a significant element of the Steelers fan base that also wants that. Like, I think when Steelers fans think about what their offense to look like, they want it to look like Jerome Bettis. They want it to look like, Franco Harris. They want it to be the teams that are running because they're 13-4 and they have a great defense and they are running in the fourth quarter. They want smash mouth football. I think there is a subset that doesn't care and just wants to win, but I think ideally that is what they want. And so I think they're sort of playing an element of fan service by hiring Arthur Smith.
Fair. That's absolutely fair. And like I said, I don't think the Rooneys are going to do anything. So we say goodbye to what I think was the worst team in the playoffs, the Steelers. When you lose 4 straight games, I mean, I think them and the Texans were the contenders coming into the day.
Well.
They were not the contenders coming out of the day. And yes, shout out to all the Ravens who got the job done today. Adafe Owe, even Nate Wiggins, who was maybe in single coverage to George Pickens a little too often and was driving Patrick Claybon crazy. We were texting about it. Matt Abuike had a nice game. Like, they have a lot of players that are playing better on defense. We'll see if they're good enough next week. And you talked about the Steelers
They
defense
did have
not
some
being
plays.
Yeah. Like, you talked about the Steelers defense not being prepared enough. This is the last time that we'll hear them this week, but, like, Kirk Herbstreit, like, doesn't know how the playoff seeds work and who's going to play each other in the playoffs, and it's just like a consistent pattern here.
Get myself in trouble. No comment.
No, yeah, you can't.
We're moving on to Chargers.
There were a couple other moments. Yes, let's move on to the Chargers-Texans game, which, despite the accusations, I believe was a fun game.
Stroud gets under center. 4th and 1 at the 17-yard line of the Chargers. CJ hands off to Mixon, running left, has the 15, 10, Mixon across the 5, Mixon to the pylon, Mixon to the end zone! Celebrate Mixon on 4th down, pay dirt! And the Texans have their lead extended. 17-yard touchdown run.
I think he just started the H-Town leap.
That was Joe Mixon. That was Mark Vandermeer and Andre Ware on KILT. 32-12. A scoregami in the playoffs.
And a scoregami in a situation where it felt like if any team was going to win 32-12 in this game for most of the first half, it felt like the Chargers were going to be that team.
It was absolutely crazy. I almost can't believe, looking at the final scores and even the final numbers, where the Texans end up with 429 yards and the Chargers end up with 261. Like, I can't believe that's how it ended, because it just didn't feel that way for most of the game. And if you look at the success rates for the two teams, they're actually pretty similar for a lot of it. But that drive, and I wanted to start there, Bill, was one of the most surprising drives I've ever seen. To see the 2024 Houston Texans, maybe they're turning a new leaf, like in the actual new year, run the ball. I believe it was 14 straight times to end that
It was
drive.
13. It's a 14-play drive where they threw the
Yes.
ball on the first play and then ran it 13 consecutive times to finish up. So that's why they're not also in the 13 for 13 club. It was 13 for 14.
Right. I have not been more surprised by a drive all season, considering how ineffective the Texans have been running the ball all year. And yet at that point, it was like the Chargers defense, which were absolutely ready for this game. It was a good defensive game. They just sort of gave out, and Houston was just much too much for them. And that place was rocking. And the Texans are going to the divisional round for the second straight year.
Yes. And, I think there was an element of being tired. They'd been on the field so often because their offense was either scoring really quickly or turning the ball over really quickly or going 3 and out. And I don't know what the play disparity was in this game. And certainly the Chargers had a lot of plays early before the Texans then took over and sort of controlled the ball. That final drive at the end of the first half, we could also talk about as a season-saving drive in some ways for the Houston Texans. This game was there. It was there for the taking for the Chargers. There is a version of this game where instead of getting stuffed on 3rd and 1 on the first drive, they convert, they score a touchdown, and they've been moving the ball really effectively. Texans turn the ball over immediately, give them a short field. They score another touchdown. They get the ball back again after they dropped a Stroud interception. And then they get a Stroud interception. They have another short field. They score on that. It's 21-0. They could have taken over this game. And there's a lot of me filling in the blanks for this offense, which is maybe undeservedly, given that they really did struggle for the majority of this game. But we see this happen in games where you give a team a couple short fields and the game's over. And, there would have been no 13-play run drive down 21-0. I think that the Texans defense did such a heroic job of saving this game long enough for the offense to finally get going. And once it did, it felt like the Chargers didn't have many answers outside of the occasional turnover.
Yeah, that's all really well said. I want to blame the Chargers on one hand for having in their first 10 drives of the game under 150 yards with 3 interceptions and a fumble that they picked up the fumble and 1 third down. 6 points. One of the field goals was a 12-yard drive that was just, set up by one of those turnovers. I want to blame the Chargers offense, but one of the reasons I actually thought this was a good game, it was obviously like a Westivus game. That is, for those who are new to the show, the early Saturday afternoon game, which our dear friend Chris Wesseling dubbed Westivus, which was when Andy Dalton and the Bengals would traditionally lose. Although at some point in there, they started playing the Texans, and the Texans just took over that time slot. And they've actually played
lost
in it.
to TJ Yates. I believe. That was
Yes.
the JJ Watt pick 6 game, I think, was the turning point.
That was the turning point. I was at a game that Brock Osweiler started against Connor Cook, which is in the mix for the worst starting quarterback matchup in the history of the NFL, certainly in the 21st century, which is more about passing. And they won that game. It was the first ever home victory by the Texans. At some point it switched to the Texans, and they own this slot. They are now 6-2. What?
Why were you at that game of all games?
For like a year or two, my old boss at the NFL wanted me to get out on the road more, and they were sending me to.
And they sent you there?
To playoff games, and yes, I was the Houston Texans or Cincinnati Bengals of NFL.com column writers. I'll respect Jeffrey Chidia, Judy Batista. They deserved their spot in line. They were doing it all season long, and so I was 4th in line. Maybe it was Weish as the other one, but yes, I would go to the worst games usually of the weekend. And they won that game. They are now 6-2 in these games, and I know I'm talking a lot here. For all the blame I want to put on the Chargers offense, I just think this was an incredible defense by the Texans. Like, sometimes that really can happen. And for a while, the Chargers defense was playing incredible this game. You mentioned the 3rd and short that they don't pick up. Well, who's making the stop there? That was Kalen Bullock, their young safety, I believe, was in on that stop. It's passes defense. Daryl Stingley ends up with 5 passes defense in this game, an incredible interception. Awesome. Kamari Lassiter has an incredible interception. Autry is making plays all over the place. Will Anderson really saved them early in this game. Like, they all just were taking turns making incredible plays, and they were just obviously better schematically and talent-wise than the Chargers offense was on this day.
Yeah, and that's a surprise because the Chargers, whatever we want to say about their offensive abilities, are a well-coached offense generally. But I think we saw a game plan that really hit the weaknesses of the Chargers hard, and that was a lot of twists with their star edge rushers, so not just rushing them one-on-one against the strengths of the Chargers, their offensive tackle, a lot of them getting them inside, getting them against the offensive guards, getting them against the centers, getting them against the running backs. That worked really well. There was a lot of flush Justin Herbert in this game. We saw a lot of doubling of Ladd McConkey. Derek Stingley did not travel in the slot with Ladd McConkey, but this was, they didn't play a lot of man coverage in this game. They played a decent amount, but it wasn't like they were, the 2016 Patriots when it came to man coverage. But I think there was that element of the same philosophy of, okay, Ladd McConkey, we're going to try and double him with our guys on the interior, get him a safety over the top on Ladd McConkey, get a linebacker to help, and then we trust Derek Stingley is going to take whoever's on his side of the field and shut them down. And that was the key part of this game in a lot of ways, is that the Chargers repeatedly tried to go at Derek Stingley and time after time were rejected. I mean, not only did Derek Stingley have a couple of two interceptions in this game, one of which was on a Will Dissly drop, the other one on a great play on a throw down field. But to me, one of the biggest plays of the game was that fourth down the Chargers went for, where Ladd McConkey is not open. The Chargers have 7 in protection. They send 3 guys out, and their only option was to throw a pivot route to Quentin Johnston against Derek Stingley, an all-pro cornerback, where not only did Quentin Johnston run a half-yard route on 4th and 2, where even if he caught it, he would have been short of the sticks, but then he also did not complete the catch, and it was an incompletion as well. So if you can get your best player against a wide receiver 3 caliber receiver and on a 4th down, that's a win for you on defense. So I think the Texans really gave the Chargers the answers they wanted them to take and then exploited those answers with their best players.
So Quentin Johnston, who had the best game of his career last week, it really was the Quentin Johnston's game.
Yeah.
I don't know what it was. It was like 8 for 197 or something insane. Didn't have a catch on 5 targets today. To go to the rest of the Chargers receivers, for non-Ladd McConkey targets, they had 45 yards on 18 targets. McConkey goes 9 for 197 and 1, including that incredible touchdown. And you can blame that completely on all the other receivers. Justin Herbert obviously bears plenty of blame in this game.
Sure does.
Ends up with 4 interceptions. It's more than he had all season long. And yet, I do think about that play. That's a good example. It's their lack of talent to win a one-on-one matchup. It's Quentin Johnston running a bad route. You can't really blame Herbert there for throwing it to him because he's got to assume his receiver.
Was the only option.
Right, is making it. That said, where you could blame him a little bit on that play maybe is you got 7 in to protect, and I know he hadn't been protected great that game. He doesn't try to become a playmaker too often.
Yeah.
Like, the ball was still out of his hands quickly, and seeing the matchup that he had, and there wasn't a lot of separation there, it's a split-second decision. But what C.J. Stroud did well in this game, more than anything, I thought was run the ball and make a couple of plays to help turn this game around. And when it's not going well for Herbert, that does stand out, that he doesn't do a lot of playmaking. So that's one pick you could knit here, along with the 4 interceptions. It's a tough week out here for Herbert, the Herbert Hive. I mean, it's going to be a tough 6 months.
It was weird because he did do that more during the regular season. That was one of the welcome benefits of Justin Herbert this year, was that he was running more, and it felt like that was something that he was being encouraged to do by the Chargers. And I want to go back, it's Saturday night, I want to go back on Sunday, or more realistically maybe Monday, and watch this game again and see if those opportunities were there. You would figure they were, but the interceptions, yes, the Will Dissly pick is not on Justin Herbert, but I got 3 that are, and that's the entirety he had of all season, that were bad decisions, bad throws. I mean, that first pick, every bit of a 2019 Josh Allen, we're all laughing on social media. What is this guy doing pick? After a interception from Justin Strat for CJ Stroud, excuse me, you're going to take a shot. I understand that. You're throwing across your body, from the right side numbers to the left side sideline. No window is there. Like, the best case scenario is it's going incomplete. Like, just a bad decision. Just a decision you cannot make as a great quarterback, as a quarterback expecting to win a playoff game. And the disheartening thing is now I think we're going to go back to this regular season, and people are going to look at what Justin Herbert did, and his numbers are not great this year. I mean, he had a incredible interception rate, but his first down rate, his yards per attempt, everything else was okay. Some above average, a little bit below average in some places. He took too many sacks, especially sacks that got him injured, where he was needlessly extending plays. There's going to be a real reflection on Justin Herbert. I don't think they're going to make any changes, obviously, but I think, there was a lot of goodwill built up for Justin Herbert over the course of this season. That, to me,
Barnwell's coming out hard. He's coming out swinging for Herbert.
What am I saying here? That's crazy. This man.
No, he had 4
interceptions in the playoff game, but he threw in the entire season. But this was an issue all year. Like, that was propping him up all season, was an incredibly low interception rate, and that's unsustainable. We know.
Okay, I thought he managed games really well all year. Their offensive line was okay this year. Their running game was miserable for the most part, and was miserable in this game. One of the lowest success rates in the league.
48 from the running
backs.
Yeah,
all season long they had one of the lowest success rates in the NFL, and they couldn't run the ball today either outside of that first drive. And even that first drive, it ends on a 3rd and 1 that gets blown up. And it even reminded me of last week against like the Raiders. Like, they couldn't get a 3rd and 1 early, or 2nd and 1, 3rd and 1 early in that game. And that was them all season. And so the running game, it stunk. It doesn't mean that it's an excuse for Herbert, but Greg Roman without a running game is like, what do you got here?
Right. That's what I was going to say is, you bring in Gregg Roman, that's what he's there for. That's what he's supposed to do, is fix your running game. And I understand this was not a running game that had a Lamar Jackson as an active participant, didn't have a Colin Kaepernick as an active participant, or a Tyrod Taylor. They didn't have the quarterback run game factored in, but Gregg Roman was still supposed to be able to build a coherent run game around the pieces he had. And I think we all love seeing J.K. Dobbins have a great start to the season, but he had 2 100-yard games to start the year and didn't have another one the rest of the way. I mean, they were very inconsistent running the football, and that led to a lot of wasted drives. And in this game, Herbert missed throws. He made mistakes. He had some really good throws, of course, as well. It's not like he was completely terrible, but it felt like they did not have the ability to rely on the run game when they needed it.
No, but the numbers are crazy. Now, if you go through the 4 interceptions, that first pick, terrible decision, but an awesome play out of Lassiter. These Texans cornerbacks
are really good.
It's the best young secondary in the league by far. I mean, that might be the best cornerback duo in the league. It's in the mix right now. Lassiter,
Eagles fans are going to be very
and Stingley.
mad.
Just because Stingley is that good right now, like, they're in the mix. But in terms of a young secondary, okay, that's fair. The Steelers. But I'm including Jalen Petrie, who was awesome this year, and he's out. And I think, is he out for the season? He's not coming back.
He's out for the season, yeah.
But Kalen Bullock's been great, and that reminds me of another play from recent weeks. Like, when he has a chance to make the catch, he makes it. Now, you got the Eric Murray pick 6. That was more of just Herbert's a little rushed, a little crowded in the pocket, throws it a little high, and it goes through McConkey's hands, but it's a high throw. They were forcing him to try to make touch passes. That really wasn't one of them, and that's not like something he does that well. And the other interception, what I'm trying to say is, sometimes you have opportunities to make an interception and you don't make them. Those weren't the easiest ones ever, and they did make them. Whereas the Chargers, for instance, as you mentioned, like second drive of the game, they drop a potential Stroud interception. I mean, hell, the Chargers did turn the ball over 3 times. The first freaking play of the game is a fumble that they force on a short catch, and it doesn't matter. The Texan defense just was ready for all of it.
Yeah, I mean, yes, there was pressure in Justin Herbert's lap on that overthrow for the pick six. It's also a throw into the flat. Like, you can
Yeah.
dirt it. You can put it in a place where it's not going to be that they're going to be a short catch or an incompletion. There's lots of things you can do. What you cannot do is sail it over your wide receiver's head. And this is not, this is not Bo Nix. This is not year one. Let's see what this guy does. It's not Caleb Williams. This guy is in his sixth
Yeah,
season?
his fifth season.
As
Fifth
a
season.
pro. Like, he's on a second contract. He is getting the hype as a superstar quarterback. Like you can't make that throw. You cannot miss that throw under any circumstances. That is I cannot think of another quarterback. I'm sure someone will clip for me tomorrow, but like, that is a throw you cannot make as a franchise quarterback in that situation. Like, you have to be able to either escape that pressure or be smart with the football and smart with your placement. And he was not, and it basically ended the game as a contest.
Yeah. Out of playoff games, I think it was your friend Seth Walder, right? That he put it out that out of 214 playoff appearances.
I think Shilkapadia.
Was it Shield that put this out that Justin Herbert was 213th in EPA per play? So it's going to be a rough offseason. I think he's a top 10 quarterback. I think he played like a top 10 quarterback this season. It's absolutely fair through 5 seasons to think that the promise of his rookie year, that he was going to be right there with the top guys in the league. He's obviously not with the top guys in the league. Can he get there eventually? Yeah, like it's possible, but he obviously is not in that top tier group. And yet, despite all this, Bill, this was absolutely a game that I still thought the Chargers were going to win when it was 6-0 late in the second quarter. Let's take back. Let's think about where the Texans were. They had the ball pretty much coming out on their own goal line. Were they on the 2-yard line? Everyone thought they were probably gonna take a safety there. Everyone's making the same joke. Like, here comes the safety. CJ Stroud.
There was almost an intentional grounding call, right?
That's what I was gonna say.
Excuse me.
That call, to me, or non-call, was almost as big as the 3rd and 16 play where Stroud scrambles after he trails after a bad snap and hits the 3rd and 16 play to kickstart that 2-minute drive. He is flushed. He's in the pocket. He throws it out of bounds. And when they showed that replay, at least from that angle, it looked like he was in the pocket to me, but it was close. Those are tough calls to make. They didn't make the call, but that would have made it 8-0 with under 2 minutes to go and them clicking off. Instead, they get another chance. He has a 3rd and 16 play, and it's just like a scramble play. And it was almost like that moment, Bill, CJ Stroud, he couldn't think because he's just running after a ball and the game is about to end. He's running after it and he's finally makes a play and gets a big first down. And after that, it was like he locked in and he was the CJ Stroud for the most part that you would want to see. There were a couple little blips, but he starts hitting a ton of in-breakers.
Yeah. I actually went and looked at it on Next Gen. I tried to chart it out, and I think it was the right call. I think it was
good to hear.
It was either the right call or it was close enough that I cannot fault them for not making the call. And my first instinct was that it was grounding. So I feel like not going to put the refs down too much for that. But I see what you're saying, and I don't disagree to one extent, but when it's 8-0 and you're getting the ball back, your instinct is, okay, we can score a touchdown and make it 15-0, and then we're in great shape. But nothing the Chargers did made me think that they were going to score. That's the only part that I find difficult to believe, is that, okay, if it was going to be a defensive touchdown, maybe that would have got them to 15-0. But it felt like even when they got short fields in this game, they were not able to do anything with them. And so, to me, the defense was going to have to win in this game. And once, like you said, once Stroud hits that play, it felt like so much of what the Chargers were doing was just taking away stuff over the top. I think they were playing, very conservative shells on defense. I think they wanted their pass rush to get home and to that be the focal point of the defense. They did lose Denzel Perryman early in this game. But there's not a great, coverage linebacker. He's more of a run blocking linebacker. So I don't think that made a big difference. But like you said, Nico Collins just got open over and over and over again on in breaking runs. They had Christian Fulton covering him a lot, and it felt like Fulton was not up to the task necessarily. But I think in the big picture, the thing I would say is just this is a very top-heavy Texans team. They have some very mediocre plays and meaningful roles. There are some guys who have been banged up because of injury, who are playing more than they should because of injuries. Like, they have their stars. They have Collins, they have Stroud, they have the defensive ends with Hunter and Anderson. They have Stingley, and then to a lesser extent, they have, maybe not to a lesser extent, but they have Lassiter and they have Bullock in the secondary. And all of those guys were awesome in this game. And that is the difference. The Texans were able to attack the weakest parts in the Chargers roster. And so many times the Chargers were stuck trying to attack the strengths of this Texans team and were not able to do so.
Will Anderson ended up with 6 quick pressures in this game, so that's under 2.5 seconds. Like, that's just like an epic performance. 7 overall. Both Danielle Hunter and Danico Autry both had 5 pressures in this game, and 3 for Hunter were quick. So,
do you remember the 2 plays before the crazy McConkey touchdown?
Okay, let's play it. So this is one of the craziest 4-play sequence. Our producer Eric had some fun putting this together. So just sit back and enjoy.
It's empty backfield for Herbert. First down from the Charger 30.
Aziz looks like he's coming.
3 receivers to the left side, wide side of the field. Aziz drops back. Here comes Will, the Terminator, with a sack on Herbert. 2nd and 17 from the Charger 23. Here's Herbert in the backfield. Again, Mario gets back there. They blast Herbert for another sack. Back to back. This is an onslaught by the Texans' defensive front. 3rd and forever.
3rd and 26. Down 23-6. Herbert to throw. Steps up in the pocket. McConkey with a grab, and McConkey to the races. 50, 40, McConkey 30, 20, 10. Touchdown Chargers on a 3rd and 26. 86-yard touchdown.
Dicker the kicker. Between the hashes with the spot, J.K. Scott will hold as the Chargers get the block kick here. And it's batted down by Dicker, and the Texans are on the move with it. It's still alive, being brought back across the 30, 20, 10. D'Angelo Ross all the way to the house as the Texans get 2. Unbelievable.
Yes, that was the 4-play sequence. Sack, sack. It's 23-6, by the way, at this point, like early in the 4th quarter. Long McConkey touchdown that was for 86 yards. A great throw by Herbert. I mean, it could have gone either way, but it got through. McConkey's so freaking good. He ends up 9 for 197. And then, yes, the blocked extra point, which I don't know how the Nickelodeon crew was on it, but I think it confused the regular CBS crew of like, wait, does this count?
I think it confused the players
as 2 either. And I think if it gets past the line of scrimmage, it doesn't count, but it doesn't matter because it's blocked before the line of scrimmage, and then they return it, and it would have been a 10-point game. Like you said, I don't think the Chargers defense was going to come back enough in this game, but that's about as wild a 4-play sequence as you will ever see. That was fun.
Yeah, and I think it's an example of everything you might want to confirm about the Chargers offense. I mean, first 2 plays, 2 just immediate sacks. I mean, just no protection whatsoever. I would guess the first is on Justin Herbert. It looks like he's hot off the right side there. Again, want to see what the tape says, but it looks like there's 3 people coming to that side, so he should be hot. Doesn't have an answer, takes a sack immediately from Will Anderson. Second play, nobody blocks anybody. It feels like 4 people break through, and then just Justin Herbert saying, screw it. I'm just throwing it as hard as I can to the only receiver I trust, and either he's going to come down with it or I'm going to throw a pick, but I don't want to get hit on this play. And then the Dicker play, which Dicker's going to get a ton of criticism for knocking the ball down. If you see J.K. Scott on this play, he sees the Texans recover it and does not break into anything more than the lightest of jogs. I think he thought the play was over. I think other players on the Chargers team thought this play was over. It was like, was it the fair kick? What did they run a couple weeks ago?
Yes, the Chargers where they had the free kick. Yes.
Yes. It felt like the opposite of the free kick, where like the free kick was, the Chargers are geniuses, their special teams are so well prepared. This was the exact opposite. It felt like they were not prepared for the situation whatsoever, and it came back to bite them and cost them 2 points at the worst possible time.
Yes, and they didn't do anything when they got the ball again anyways, and they also couldn't get off the field as the Texans are just running the ball over and over and over. I will say, I thought of a comp today for Ladd McConkey, just in terms of how people talk about him. I was convinced after Nico's kind of breakout year that, like, coming into this year, that he was still weirdly undervalued, that contract was one of the best contracts in the entire NFL, and because he's like a top 10 type of receiver. And I don't think people quite saw him that way. The Texans knew, and he is. I mean, we saw that again when he's on the field this year. He is absolutely electric. There's nothing that he can't do. He ends up with 7 for 122 and 1. He can do it all. I think Ladd McConkey is going to be a top 10 NFL receiver. There's this weird thing because he's so small that people just immediately like, oh, as long as you get someone with him, he'll be fine. What doesn't he do? He wins on the outside. He wins contested catches. He is electric in terms of his short area quickness, but he has long speed. If you watch the second half of this season, there's so many catches like that where he is leaping. He's not mossing guys because of his size, but he's winning at the catch point. As long as he stays healthy, and he stayed healthy this year, I don't see why he isn't a guy that can't put up even better numbers than he did this year. And they were absolutely electric, and you can build a passing game around him. It's just, you need more than just one guy. You need, like Nico needs this year, his guys are hurt. You need to get more guys around him. But Ladd McConkey is that good. He's one of the better like rookie receiver seasons we've seen in a while. The problem is he's surrounded by all these other great rookie receivers.
That's the tough part, though, is that he did this with nobody around him this year. And that's the big offseason project for the Chargers is getting more playmakers, whether it be a running back, whether it be a tight end, whether it be hopefully at wide receiver. It stinks because you're basically writing off the first round pick the prior regime used on Quentin Johnson and sort of not relying on him.
They tried. They tried to make it work this year. You know?
He was okay. He had some terrible games. That Ravens game, I think, was really awful. I don't think you want to run it back next year needing Quentin Johnson to be your wide receiver too. I think if he's in the mix, it's fine. But I think so many teams are going to try and get T. Higgins, but they need somebody else who could win on the outside. So McConkey can be, poor man CeeDee Lamb on the inside.
Sure. But McConkey, that's a fair comparison. I mean, he's obviously not going to be as physical. And maybe it is the size, and maybe because he struggled staying healthy at Georgia, and it felt like every game he was kind of limping to the sideline this year. But then you look at what he actually just did, and I couldn't be more impressed. I would absolutely take him in a redraft over Marvin Harrison Jr., Rome Odunze. It's not even close because this tape matters more. And to me, he showed wide receiver 1 NFL tape. I would still take Brian Thomas over him. Like, I love Brian Thomas. Malik Neighbors is awesome. So whatever you could choose, but like he's a
that's
dude.
Not bad. Being right up there with Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas is not exactly
right. And I wouldn't argue like if you were like this guy fits what we want to do. Like he is absolutely a dude. So is Nico Collins. So is CJ Stroud. I hope he locks in a little bit. One thing that really struck me was a really key sequence at the end of the first half after the Texans score their first touchdown. They're hitting all those Nico Collins in breakers. They get one for a touchdown. The Chargers get the ball back. The Chargers actually took what I thought was a smart timeout late in the Texans drive to try to save themselves time, and it paid off. They have a decent amount of time, but they go 3 and out, and they give the ball right back to the Texans, who get a field goal that was really keyed by a CJ Stroud scramble. And that was the first big scramble. And he never scrambles. And D'Amico Ryans was shown on the sideline at that point yelling, "That's what I'm effing talking about. That's what I'm effing talking about." And he was so happy that Stroud just finally ran because he's so just loath to run all season. And then the second half of the game, he really ran a lot. The dude can't slide. I don't know what's up with that, but it was a big part of this game, him picking up first downs and then just kind of like falling forward in a way that made him look like he was going to get hurt.
It still counts. As long as you don't break your ankle sliding, it's good.
Sure.
I mean, that's never going to be the focal point of his game, but it gives the opposing team something to think about. I guarantee the Chargers did not come into this game thinking, okay, we have to be prepared for the possibility of spying CJ Stroud. Like, we can control him in the pocket. We're good. That never came up, and it absolutely mattered. And now whoever they play next week has to be prepared for that. They have to think, okay, like, CJ Stroud's going to go if we don't have eyes on him. That's going to change the way they rush the passer, going to change the way they play coverage. It opens up a lot of things. There's a reason that a lot of the best quarterbacks in football are devastating scramblers, because it is a button you can press that picks up easy yards, helps you convert 3rd and longs, and changes the way people cover you on defense.
What did you think, like, overall, does this give you optimism that the Texans offense specifically could play well enough to win another game? Because the defense, this is one of the best defensive performances you could possibly have. To ask this again is too much, but they could be the best defense left in the playoffs if they just went on a tear. I'm not expecting them to be. I'm just saying, like, we've seen that happen. A defense gets really hot. Now, can the offense, do you think, play well enough to give them a real chance to beat these better teams?
They proved that they could do it for a half, or for a little over a half of football. They were incredible on offense outside of the turnovers, which they lost a fumble, and they nearly threw an interception to Derwin James. They tried their best. It was more of a good play by Derwin James than a bad throw by CJ Stroud, but this offense had been so inconsistent and so frustrating all season. They'd been stuck in 3rd and long so many times. And eventually they're going to hit a couple 3rd and longs, and they did in this game. But to me, they were so bad early in this game. Like, they could have thrown a couple interceptions. They lost a fumble. They looked like they weren't on the same page. Like, Stroud's throws, nobody was even near them early in this game.
He seems as streaky as any quarterback in the league, that he can be in his own head where he just can't think straight, and then, like, something happens and then he clicks in and he's CJ Stroud again for the rest of the game or for a couple quarters, and they have some good drives, but I still have my doubts. I mean, even during that second half run where they were coming back, they had the fumble, they had a 2nd and 40 situation, which you don't see too often. They also had a 2nd and 1 at the 4-yard line, where they ended up settling for a field goal. That was a 4-play, 1-yard drive where they go backwards. That was like, so even during this run, I don't know. It's hard. It's a little hard for me to see this offense getting it going, but you have a quarterback that you have a chance.
But I had no faith in them being good on offense heading into the postseason. And now I'm still skeptical, but at least I saw them be good for a half. That's a half more than I had seen from them for the vast majority of this season against good football teams.
And the vibes are good. Let's actually listen just quickly to Will Anderson post-game with Omar Ruiz.
Congratulations, Will. That one-game season continues.
Yes, sir, it does. Thank you. Let's go, Texas!
I love a little bit of that. I also love the locker room, which we don't have clearance for, that D'Amico Ryans comes in, and one of the first things he says to the team is, how about that bye week? In reference to Rex Ryan. A lot of the players were talking about some comments that I wasn't even aware of until then, that Rex Ryan said it was going to be, or until recently, that was going to be a bye week, but that was a rallying cry for this team. The dismissal from your colleague. I know you can't talk trash.
I would never comment on that. I mean, we saw who is it? The Vikings and Lions. The Rams have the Kevin O'Connell. We're going to see you in 2 weeks.
But Dan Campbell's the one who said it. What is this? What is this secondhand like trash talk that I've never heard of? Like secondhand trash talk. Rex Ryan, I get. It's just like someone from the media. You can yell at the media. People do that. But this was Dan Campbell that said, "See you in 2 weeks." But somehow that they're mad at Dan Campbell, I guess.
Feels like we're finding very innocuous stuff to push back on, or even collateral damage. Like I can end up as bulletin board material for a different team. I trace this back to the Tom Brady "everyone says we suck" comment, where it turned no one could possibly find anyone saying the Patriots sucked that year. But I'm sure there was like someone on Reddit saying that they sucked, and that was enough for Tom Brady.
Well, they'll have plenty more people to find as doubters going into next week. Before we get out of here, let's at least we'll hear from Justin Herbert. I fear for this tall, handsome man's off season.
Yeah, it's tough. I let the team down, and you can't turn over the ball like that and expect to win, and put the team into a tough position there with 4 turnovers like that. So, the defense hung tough. They got some turnovers. They gave us opportunities, but I just have to be better. Nope. It's just on me to protect the ball and be better about that. It was aggressive downfield, and you got to do a better job of getting the ball out, throwing it away, or better ball placement. So that's on me.
Some of the numbers were just crazy, like over 10 yards, 6 for 17. Against pressure, he started out 1 for 10.
He started out one of 11. The 11th was the pick 6. Yeah, I mean, listen, he's a. I don't want to be part of this Justin Herbert culture war. I have felt the same about him for several years. I think he is very talented. I think the results are not always there. I think he has the ability to be a franchise quarterback. He has never had a season as good as many of his peers in that draft class. Does not make him a bad quarterback, but we have been sitting here for many years now waiting for him to have an MVP caliber season, and he's never really come close. And that's fine. But I think we have to be realistic about what the guy is versus what I think we want him to be or are hoping he's going to be.
Not Herbo Beast. Yeah. So the Jim Harbaugh initial season for the Chargers somehow ends up feeling a little more similar to how a lot of Chargers seasons ended.
Take it. If you were a Chargers fan this time
last year, of course.
We said you're going to the playoffs, you'd be fine.
Of course. They won a couple games at the end of the season. The game against the Broncos was great. I mean, it was a step forward. The schedule was easy and will get harder, but they definitely took a step forward. They were a disaster last year, and so to make the playoffs at all is a big step. But they were road favorites here, and they did not get it done. You were one of my favorites, Bill. I appreciate you coming on for the first time we've ever done this, like a Saturday night playoff recap, and appreciate everyone who came into the chat. A lot of people watching live. Got to check out the Bill Barnwell podcast. Where else are you going to be this week? Around the NFL? I mean, around the horn. Oh, there's a Freudian slip.
Yes, I'll be on Around the Horn this week. Probably talking about Justin Herbert some more. Probably Sports Center this weekend. We will see plenty of stuff to discuss here, but
and ESPN Plus. Everyone,
that's true.
As I say, it's worth it just for Bill. It's worth it for Bill and the Australian Open like court 14 Kei Nishikori match that I'm gonna watch if he's still playing. Although he was down 2 sets when I went into this. Let's get out of here. Thank you, Eric. We will be back on Sunday night recapping those 3 games. It'll be with Patrick Claybon, Nick Shook, maybe a special guest. Thanks again, as always, to Will Barnwell. Yes, when the Chargers are charging right out of the playoffs, football is back. See you Sunday.